Thanks for joining. Sorry about that hiccup. I'm Nare, one of the co-chairs for California ACC Fit. I'm very grateful to all of you for joining. I think in the interest of time, we can go ahead and get started with introductions, and I'm sure more people will trickle in as we do that. Our series this year is called Tips and Tricks for Thriving in Fellowship and Beyond. And this is our first session for the year focused on mentorship. I think we'll have a great session, and we have some wonderful panelists. I want to thank Tintin and Lydia for helping plan this session. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tintin to start with some of the introductions of our panelists.
Awesome. Thank you, Nari. I'm Tintin, a current fellow at Scripps Clinic. Thank you to Dr. Muse, Dr. Robinson, and Dr. Venugopal for joining us this evening for this session. Very excited about it. For the audience, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourselves during this session, or you can put your questions in the chat as well, and we will get to those as well. But I will start by introducing our first two speakers. Dr. Muse is our first panelist. He is a cardiologist, a physician scientist at Scripps Clinic. He did his undergraduate studies in biochemistry at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and then went on to complete his medical and graduate studies as part of the MSTP program at Albert Einstein in New York. Then, following an internship and residency in internal medicine at Columbia, he completed his training in cardiology at Scripps Clinic, and he is currently the Assistant Program Director for Research for the Cardiology Fellowship Program at Scripps, and has been an invaluable asset to us for all our research endeavors for all the fellows. And our second panelist, Dr. Robinson, is also a cardiologist and an advanced cardiac imager at Scripps Clinic. After his medical school at UCLA and residency at Yale, he did general cardiology and advanced imaging fellowships at the University of Virginia. He then joined Scripps Clinic in 2020 and loves all parts of academic medicine. Very excited. Dr. Robinson was my clinic mentor during my first year and taught me everything about imaging. So very excited about these two panelists. I will hand it over to Lydia to introduce our third panelist here.
Thank you so much, Tintin. And again, thank you, Dr. Muse and Dr. Robinson. Now I have the great honor of introducing my program director and my personal mentor, Dr. Sandhya Venugopal, who is currently a clinical professor in the Division of Cardiovascular Medicine, School of Medicine at the Davis, and she's also, as I said, the program director. She was also the associate dean for continuing medical education. She is an non-invasive cardiologist and specialist in the use of frontline assessment to determine cardiac health. She received her medical degree from the University of Connecticut and completed her internal medicine residency training at Oregon. And she completed her fellowship at University at the Rush Medical Center in Chicago. She received also her master's degree in health professions. The education is through Massachusetts General Hospital Institute of Health Professions. She's also a graduate of Hedwig van Ameringen Executive Leadership in Academic Medicine through Drexel University in 2018. Dr. Venugopal's scholarly interests are focused on health professions, educational program evaluation, and curriculum development, and I'm very excited that she's joining us today.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you again to all three of our panelists tonight. I can start us off with the first question here. And for the audience, again, if you want to just put your questions in the chat box, directed to any one of us, that would be great. But I'm sure everyone here have benefited from having mentoring relationships, having people who guided them throughout all stages of their training. And what I was wondering if our panelists, if you can share maybe a little bit about your experience with finding mentors of your own during your training, during your professional development, during your careers. And Dr. Muse, if you want to start us off, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for the organizers. I think having a tips and tricks is, just the right thing because, we can learn from ourselves and each other, et cetera. But, what a good group you've put together. I think we reach out to mentors for different things, right? So I think that you identify a certain goal, right? In research, you think of, oh, here are my interests, or I'd like to learn how to write, or I'd like to learn how to do statistical research in, preventive cardiology or lipidology, and then you kind of gravitate to certain mentors. Clinical things kind of comes out the same way, whether you're interested in, specific aspects of cardiology or training. But I wish it was as directed as that, because oftentimes I've found, at least in my own life, they come on serendipitously. They come on from just, having a good human to human conversation, meeting someone, starting with an idea or a common interest, and then it kind of thrives from there, right? I think mentorship can happen in these organized ways where you specifically go reach out to folks. But that serendipitous, being in the right place at the right time, with a good question and, striking up a good conversation, that's typically how it's happened, kind of in my life. I still reach out to mentors all the time, not only from fellowship, but, even from post-training where I'm asking questions about, difficult clinical cases or different clinical humans, is oftentimes which we're managing, as well as research and new things in science as well. So, but the first thing is just being open, right? Being open to discovery and open to kind of being vulnerable a little bit and asking questions, and you just trying to be human. That's I think would be a first step. I don't know if Dr. Venugopal or Dr. Robinson kind of agree, and what their experience has been like as well.
Yeah, I make a practice never to disagree with Dr. Muse, but maybe I can share a couple of anecdotes, and I don't think they're perfect, right? Like my past history of mentors isn't perfect, so these aren't necessarily models, but and I would echo, what you want out of a mentor, like Dr. Muse is saying, really important. And I think maybe for the fellow stage, it's very different than the mentor role you've been looking for in your career prior. For people going on to advanced fellowships, then I think maybe you're still looking for the same type of mentor. But for someone who's like maybe not looking to more training after their general fellowship right now, the type of mentor you want is different than when you're a resident, right? And you need someone who's gonna write you a letter for cardiology fellowship. You can work on research together, and then also make calls for you. That's a very different role than the person who's going to help guide where you're going to work, what kind of career you're going to have. So, and I think most of the mentorship we've thought about this before. And so some of my anecdotes may or may not be totally applicable to fellows. But so when I was a resident in a big residency program, wanted to do cardiology, and there are a lot of people in my class who want to do cardiology. And you kind of know who the cardiologists are who want to work, who are great to work with. And those are the low hanging fruit, and they get picked up pretty fast. So there was someone, so I asked around a lot. There were some people I heard about, but never had a chance to work with them. So some relationships I just willed into existence. There was an attending that I heard good things about. We never worked together. I was, I think, finishing my intern year, and we weren't going to work together most likely. And so I reached out to him, and he kind of he wasn't super enthusiastic, but he responded politely. We met, and he was kind of half-hearted. And I pitched some ideas to him, and he kind of responded a little bit. And like I basically forced him to agree to work on a project of my choosing. And then, we we brought the project to fruition. And by the end of it, I felt like I earned his respect, and he liked me. And, and he's been in, a good relationship since then. So sometimes you have to find the mentor and, prove that you're worth their kind of effort, because sometimes people are just busy. And And you know, sometimes you miss on the type of mentor you think is going to be good, and that's fine. You know, you work with a lot of different people. The other thing I will say is that when I was going into fellowship, I was really mindful of having a mentor, and that was part of picking a program. And so you know, when I was interviewing fellowships, I was really interviewing potential mentors. So I picked my fellowship based on essentially the person I was going to be working with. And, you know, he and I, you know, became close beforehand, before I matched, and we talked a lot. And then, you know, he became a little bit more senior while I was there, became the chief of cardiology. He's actually going to be the ACC president this year, Chris Kramer. He's a good person, but I really wanted him to be not just a mentor, someone to teach me what to be and to learn, but also I wanted him to be a sponsor for me, you know? So it's, I think a mentor and a sponsor are a little bit different things, you know, someone who would help move me on. And so he would send me review articles to co-write, or let me review articles for journals. And, you know, so I think kind of, as you think about institutions, if you're going to do, you know, interventional cardiology, or you're going to do EP, you find the people that you want to be like, and who are also going to vouch for you. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you got to do some effort, but you know, usually those are the good relationships that are fun.
I couldn't agree more. First, thank you very much for allowing me to be one of the panelists. This is fantastic to meet you all, and also to meet Dr. Muse and Dr. Robinson. Just to dovetail off what everyone's already said, you definitely can start at your own institution, but be open to people that you might meet at conferences, or, you know, if there's some sort of event that you're at. Always kind of keep your eyes open. And in some sense, which is kind of what's already been said, you want someone who, for a mentor who can, in some sense, see around the bend for you, right? Someone who, you know, that, look, you're looking to see, where do I want to be in, say, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And what kind of person do I want to be? And what kind of education, or what kind of examples do I want to see? And that could be something simple as what you just heard about, right? If you've never written grants before and you want to be able to learn how to write grants, find a mentor who can help you in that regard. If that you feel like research is something that you will probably eventually do in your professional lifetime. Or if you want someone, you know, for off the bat, you really are looking for being that great clinician educator, and you want to be able to learn how to develop curriculum, same sort of things, right? You sort of have a vision of what you want to do. And so you can find mentors who've actually, in some sense, done that. And that way they can sort of anticipate challenges that you may have and help you navigate those challenges as you think about, you know, your long-term career goals. So it's always great to start at your own institution, and keep in mind that your mentors don't have to be at your institution, right? They can be anywhere. And it doesn't mean that if you move institutions that you can't stay with mentors that you've had at old institutions. So it's always nice to just be able to keep those doors open, because some of those mentors that you've had, like just as Dr. Robinson said, will become sponsors for you. And really those sponsors are those people who kind of help you go up the ladder, so to speak, you're in your career, and start opening doors and making phone calls for you. And they may even recognize things in you that you yourself might not recognize, right? So for example, they may point out, hey, you know what, you're really good at X, and you may not have thought about doing X, right? So this might be an opportunity for you to help them see things in you that you probably weren't really initially thinking about. So.
Thank you very much, everyone. It sounds like we do agree there's that personal connection component. And additionally, these mentorships can be in relation to career versus personal development. And Dr. Robinson also gave an example of needing to work from the mentee's standpoint. So the next question is trying to assess, in your opinion, how can a mentee develop and cultivate the relationship with mentors, whether it's a spontaneous or whether it's, you know, coming and going type of relationship as a mentee? What should a person do? Thank you. And maybe Dr. Robinson, you can start.
Sure. I think a common theme is going to be like all across is look inward first, right? Look where you want to go. And if you want to cultivate a relationship with a mentor, what kind of person do you want? What kind of person do you need to be that mentor wants to try to connect with you? So people come to me a fair amount, maybe not as much as they knock on Dr. Muse's door because they want to work on research projects. And I always put out a test balloon. And mostly people they're saying, do you have a project I can hop on? And usually I have some projects that are on the back burner or some ideas I want to work on, but I'm never sure if I can trust the person yet. Because even if I've worked with them a little bit, I don't know the type of person that do they have enough time and effort and follow through that I can rely on them, with a project that's interesting to me. So I almost always give them a smaller, easier project that's less important to me, and I wait for them to come back and kind of see what kind of follow through they do. And often, I don't get kind of the response I'm hoping for, and then I don't give them much more than that. So I'm always waiting to see, what are you going to do with the little bit I give you, and then is it worth for me to invest more in relationships? So that's, I think, if the question is, what can you do to kind of generate those relationships? It's show the mentor that you care about them in their relationship. Put in effort, put in time, check back with them regularly, even if you don't have, haven't had the time to work on the project or think about the thing that the two of you have talked about. At least check in with them. I've been really busy on XYZ, and I'm thinking a lot about it. Here's my just regular follow-up email. If it's not important to you, it's unlikely to be important to your mentor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, that proactive hard work aspect, right? It's I love how you said test balloon. That's exactly what it is, especially with new relationships, because it takes energy and effort to set aside from all the other things you have going on. And if folks come in with neat ideas that you get to spitball, even if they don't fly, you see this spark, right? And you see this, oh, this is cool. I get then to learn something about their ideas, because every mentee that I've had, it's been a two-way street, right? We get to grow professionally in that relationship, no matter what level folks come in at. That even happens to me when I mentor, high school students in the summer, right? There's always new things that I get to walk away with. So I think that proactive approach, and then ready to work hard, right? And ready to, continue to knock on that door, even if it feels a little bit awkward. We've all had clinical training. We all know you go in these bubbles of things and you don't come up for a little while, but if you don't ever come up, then we're going to have moved on. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sometimes having just recurring calendar meetings, right, on your calendar, or just touch points, even if you yourself say, okay, I'm going to touch base at this date and so on and so forth. So your mentor knows that you're still very much interested. You're very, being very proactive, and just like that's been said, right? You don't want to have the relationship wither away for not being proactive, even though it just happens, right? Sometimes if they don't see, it's a sort of out of sight, out of mind. If they don't see you, it's the relationship may wither in the mentee relationship standpoint, not necessarily just the attending versus the fellow. You're still going to work with the same person from a clinical standpoint or a research standpoint, but if you really want to foster that mentee-mentor relationship, having those frequent touch points and being proactive, like has been said, is very important.
Thank you.
I think tacking on to what all three of you have mentioned earlier in terms of building these mentorship relationships in the institutions you're training in, or beyond the institutions that you trained in terms of developing, maybe especially for us as trainees or as early career physicians here, for those of us early in our career trying to develop maybe professional relationships, a network of colleagues or mentors outside of your institution, our own institution. I think all of us probably at some point we go to conferences and we're like, oh, this person is doing amazing things in their clinical field or their research, and I really want to get to know them, know a little bit more about their work. But you're also kind of a little bit worried, am I going to be bothering them? Are they going to be like feel bothered by me if I approach them? Are there any advice our panelists would have for us when we, in terms of maybe reaching out to potential mentors outside of our immediate institution?
Yeah, Tintin, I think it's, conferences are a great time for that. I think that looking at a conference as just I'm going to go to the late breakers or do this stuff is really a waste of that conference, right? Actually, in the era of social media, you can actually discover more on Blue Sky or X or whatever you're paying attention to than you are kind of at the sessions themselves because everything's coming out simultaneously. I think that, and I've learned this from from my wife, is to use these situations as like every day try to meet 5 people, right? And as you're preparing for that conference, start thinking of who are the folks that I know are going to be there that I can email beforehand and say, hey, let's run into each other, let's grab a coffee. It doesn't have to be more than 10 minutes, or if you know that they're going to be by a poster or they're giving a talk. I love when people, when I meet people after giving a talk and, have formed research collaborations and followed people that way. Other folks have emailed before the conference and said, hey, I saw that you're giving a talk. I'd love to meet you. Is there a good time to have a coffee or meet up to discuss X, Y, and Z? That's expected, and that's actually the right way to do that, right? If you're just going to one of these conferences to listen to the late breakers, it's a waste of your energy, I would say, and that's why I try to get fellows early on to think about, even if you don't have primary research, think about those clinical cases. It gets you standing in front of a poster. It gets you meeting people. They're going to be your future bosses. They're going to be people that can future collaborators. So start trying to look at each, conference and seminar that you go to as being a special time to network, because that's really where you're gonna find fulfillment in your career by having this huge group of people. And it's really the magic that happens, kind of outside of the conference rooms and the main seminar meetings that gives us the biggest bang. So a great point, Tintin.
I'd also add that, when you do all this, also connect with them like on LinkedIn or as Dr. Muse just mentioned on X, follow them, connect with them in that way as well. Especially we're a social media world, right? So you'll never know when the next time a conference happens to be in your back door and, your mentors are there now. And so it's a great way to just keep tabs on what they're doing and where they're going.
Yeah, I've definitely not perfected the art of connecting with people outside of institutions. In addition to social media and in-person conference connections, the other is there's a lot of mutual acquaintances you have. So Tintin, I believe you mind me sharing, just going through interventional cardiology fellowship application cycle. And it's funny, not an interventional cardiologist, but how many people like she met that I know or that I've heard of. And this is a great example, with kind of California ACC, that we have so many people here from different institutions. And let's say there's someone at another institution in California that you're interested in connecting with, and maybe you don't know them and you don't want to cold email them, and you're not, we've got a few months to ACC, but Tintin or someone at that institution. It's, I think, a totally reasonable thing to say, hey, what do you think about this person who works in EP there or who does advanced heart failure there? And do you ever interact with them? And would you mind connecting us? Because mutual acquaintances are always happy to connect. And I don't think I've ever had a fellow do the reach out to me because they know somebody. But if they did, I'd be like, oh, you know this person? Yeah, I'd love to meet them if they're friends with you. It'd be really fun.
I do
Thank
want to.
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead, Dr. Vinokoval. No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to add, maybe we don't do it as often, but I do want to add a little plug in for that cold email. I love it when I get a cold email from a fellow saying, hey, can I meet with you, or I'm going to be here. And so I don't know how popular it is these days, but don't shy away from it. Of course, if people are busy and they're not able to respond, that doesn't mean that they're ghosting you or anything like that. I think it's just, it might be that they're just busy and you just have to find another way to connect with them. But I think cold emails are still an initial way to potentially start.
Yeah, and have an ask and maybe a solution. You know, when you're cold emailing someone, make it easy, right? You know, say, hey, I'm typically free Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. I can zip together a Zoom meeting. I'll send you an invite, you know, and then at least it's not then 15 other emails of let's find this time and yada, yada. Have the ask, be open, be vulnerable, you know, put it out there, and, you know, 99 times out of 100, you're going to get an email back saying, great, let's talk as soon as you want, you know, because we're all open to it. It's complete. It's a cool thing, you know?
That's amazing. Thank you so much. That's so helpful.
Yes, I agree. And in this era of technology, I think you may have mentioned some components of it. So cold email with good good backup planned email is not a bad idea. In addition to that, if you can point us to any do's and don't do's with the digital era.
You know, I think you don't want to then just start name dropping a bunch of people, right? That kind of thing. It comes off, even though maybe it's an attempt to draw a connection, sometimes it can come off as being, you know, certain ways or whatever. It's just, again, be honest, be real. You know, say, hey, I'm interested in, is it a clinical thing? Is it a research thing? It's like, you got an amazing career. You know, I'd like some advice of my own as I start to transition from, you know, junior fellow to senior fellow, and then the next steps. No matter what it is, you know, I think that then just being honest about it and then kind of suggesting what you see those next steps as, you know, and you don't need a huge long introduction to be honest with you, right? The whole TLDR thing, right? You know, just put it out there, and you know, most people will, you know, will just say, yeah, sounds great, let's get to know each other, let's meet up, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, people just want to see that you're genuine, right? Because it's a mutual relationship that you're building, and so you would expect the same from the person that you're reaching out to. So really, that's really what it comes down to. And I think you might have some bumps along the way, but don't give up and just keep trying until, you know, it's the penny eventually will drop. So it's just a matter of kind of reaching out and as long as you're genuine and honest, and like I said, have an ask, and keep trying. And sometimes getting a no is just as important as getting a yes. And so, you know, if it doesn't work out with one particular mentor, that's okay. Maybe that person wasn't the right person for you, right? And so it's just, then you can go on and think about someone else that you might be more interested in. So
I like that. I think it's important also to know that when you do get a potential no, right? Everyone's got stuff, right? And everyone's might be in different points in their life or different busy, and it's probably not a thing with you in terms of asking or what it is, but it's just not the right time, right?
Yeah, I would say, if I could give a list, you know, and recap: do be genuine, be earnest, be persistent, don't be generic. You know, people, I get emails from people sometimes just because they pulled my email from somewhere, and it's like a very generic something that clearly, like, my name's just put in for something. And don't ask more than you're willing to give, right? So you always lead with, you know, what your ask is and what you're offering, and you know, and show that you're willing to kind of follow through and provide anything, or, do the legwork on whatever you want, to be able to coordinate a meetup or something like that. So, yeah.
I think I just saw a private message in the chat, but someone's asking for the panelists, maybe in your own personal mentoring relationships, whether it's with your mentors or with your mentees, what are your experiences like? What's like a usual or typical, how often do you meet with your mentors or mentees? And then generally, what type of communication, phone call, in person, Zoom, etc., do you find most helpful to you?
I think this is highly individualized, and you'll kind of develop a groove with the person you work with. So I can give you some anecdotes, and I don't think that's generalizable. I get a lot of emails, so I tell people all the time, don't email me. It's not my favorite way to connect, especially with people I like. The fellows, so as a mentor, the fellows that I've been the closest with show up at my office, and they kind of develop a rhythm for when that's okay and when I'm busy. But though I find that the in-person interactions are the best, and that's also when we have the, usually they'll show up at my office because they want to talk to me about something, but then we'll also find a way to work in a couple of other things. I'll be able to hear from them about how they're doing personally or clinically, or in terms of their progression in the fellowship or their career. But then also we'll spitball or talk a little bit about research ideas or ways to connect with people. So I think drop-ins are really helpful, but it has to be the right person. And it's usually something that's kind of unfolded as part of our relationship.
For me, it's similar. Yeah, in-person meetings. Sometimes it might just be a casual hallway conversation. But my mentees actually have my cell phone number, so they know that they can contact me. Actually, all the fellows have my cell phone number, but the mentees especially know that they can always contact me, especially if they want to just run something by me, or they want to, grab a cup of coffee real quick or something like that. So, but I agree, it's very individualized in terms of what people are comfortable with.
Dr. Muse, would you like to comment on this?
Oh, no,
Or-
I mean, I think it's non-controversial, in terms of the, the individualization of it. It all depends on what that need is and how that mentorship is coming along. And, I agree, emails are the bane of our existence. So, it all depends, what we're looking at. So.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm going to segue and bring up the topic of feedback, and we can always go back and forth. When you are playing the role of the mentor, do you feel like you have the guardian obligation of giving feedback to that mentee and just helping them in all aspects of that person's career? Or do you compartmentalize on what your role is, just maybe focus on research versus clinical for that mentee? Maybe Dr. Venugopal could start.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. As a program director, with that hat on, I feel like there are definitely days where I have to span the whole gamut in that regard, right? So for me, I really had that initial conversation with my mentee to try to see what kind of relationship does the mentee want? Like, what are the expectations on both sides, right? And how do I best help the mentee in the growth process? So sometimes I'll have a mentee who just says, look, I just want to touch base with you once every 6 months. And is that okay if I can just do that? And then I have other mentees who will say, can I talk to you every couple of weeks as I'm going through different rotations, and can you tell me how I'm progressing, give me feedback on my clinical skills, and so on and so forth. So it really varies for me. And then with that program director hat on, I usually will have those conversations that I need to have with my mentees as a result. So I just have that initial conversation saying, how would you like, what kind of relationship would you like? How do you want us to work together? And of course, it's not set in stone, and we can always flex one way or the other depending on the needs. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just say, I don't usually give clinical feedback to my mentees. Outside of the regular clinical work we'll do together. Doesn't mean you shouldn't. That's just usually not how our relationship unfolds.
Yeah, I think that you find, depending on how the relationship is, if someone comes in, you're doing you're talking about research, but they're not on their game, and they're really rock stars, and then you can ask, you can say, hey, how are things? Like Dr. Robinson saying, if you're having that, face to face, and you were here to talk about, your statistical plan of, this, but something's up, but if you've had a somewhat of a relationship, you can see that. Again, we're all humans, right? And I think it's okay to ask, hey, is there anything going on? I'm here for you, if you need anything. But I, as kind of the scientist in me, oftentimes says, all right, we're now in science mode, and we're here to kind of talk about, this aspect and this plan. And oftentimes it doesn't say, well, and by the way, on rounds the other day, that doesn't necessarily come up, because I feel that fellows have so much evaluations going on all the time. And, you need to be in the right place for that, to have it be meaningful. Otherwise, it's just, it's like that nagging parent, and it's like, just could you get off my shoulder? It's like we're all allowed to not be on our A game 100% of the time, right? So yeah, there's a time and a place for everything, and it all depends on that relationship and how it's going, and what, and I like what Dr. Venugopal was saying is, sometimes people have said, here's the kind of relationship I want to have, and you want to respect that,
Thank you.
I think we have a question in the chat here. Somia's asking, for the new incoming fellows, how can they make their way as a mentee in a new institution? I think the three of you have touched on maybe a little bit of that earlier, but any advice you have for maybe someone who's new, just started somewhere, maybe doesn't know anyone just yet, maybe a little bit scared as well in that process?
I think one of the things that came up earlier is that proactive aspect, right? I think it's always good to have almost kind of an elevator pitch that that says, like, here's who I am, here's what I've done, here's what I'm interested in, right? When you're getting to know people, so it's not awkward and fumbly, right? But just like, the first years that come in that are saying, oh, I'm interested in, interventional. I was like, well, have you met so-and-so? And if not, let's make it happen, just hey, I might be interested in interventional. I've enjoyed your work. Happy to be here. Maybe something comes up, right? Because not seen, not heard, forgotten, right? No one's going to know what you want to do. And then those opportunities to write review papers, case studies, to be a part of this panel, this group, which we love having fellows in, we might not know that you're interested in those sort of things. So being in centers where we have fellows, the faculty appreciate that it's a quick life. Those 3 years that you're there go by just like that. So let's start early and capitalize on it. And again, be vulnerable to a little awkwardness, to be like, hey, I'm new here, just wanted to introduce myself. I look forward to finding if there's some way for our paths to cross and get something done. Or you go in with a specific ask, I say, hey, I know how to do X, Y, and Z. I'm interested in what you do. Anything for us to work on together,
I'll also add that, especially when you're coming as an incoming fellow, give yourself that time and space to find your mentor, right? You don't have to find your mentor on day one of as a first-year fellow, but give yourself an opportunity as you're rotating in the cath lab or the echo lab or the EP lab to try to see like who are the people that you meet, right? And do you feel like that, as we were talking about that organic aspect of mentorship, try to see who, what resonates with you and give yourself that time. So it's okay if you don't find someone in the first 6 months, it's okay. And so that way, at least you'll have an idea of, and you get to know yourself a little bit better as you go through these rotations, right? Because you're also making that transition from internal medicine residency into cardiology fellowship. So that allows you to really find out who you are in that process.
Do you think it's fair to say that, I always tell people you're not marrying your mentor. You're not putting a ring on anything. It doesn't have to be, this is the first person you meet and you thought it was going to work and you have to be with them. But I think it's fair to say that, you should get to know some people and kind of start exploring, even though it doesn't have to be that person who's you're going to follow with forever,
I think so. If I'm understanding the question right, these are for people who have maybe just matched and they know they're headed to an institution or staying but entering fellowship. I think let's say if it's an institution new to you, the mentalists I would have are, these are the people I interviewed with. Like I would have a potential mentors list that I'm always like updating, right? And you don't have to stress about it, but it's just something that if you're being proactive, you're kind of thinking. And the inputs into that list right now are the people I met when I was interviewing, right? These are the people that I thought were interesting. And then maybe the people I've heard about because I've just heard about people at this institution. And then, like Dr. Venugopal is saying, like as you're working, then you're adding and removing people from that list. And as you're talking to your co-fellows, and then you're kind of like always working on that. And then as people on that list fall into the next list, which is people I want to become a mentor with, then you act.
Thank you. Those are amazing, amazing answers. I remember I'm about to graduate in a couple months, but I remember coming here as a first year and didn't know a single soul, and then just kind of like wandering around in the back office and seeing whose doors open, and then just kind of randomly saying hi and striking up conversations. I feel like Dr. Muse and Dr. Robinson have been bothered by me with that, just stopping by and randomly asking how they're doing. But I think those have really enriched my experience as well. And then was able to meet a lot of people pretty quickly. So that's all great advice. And there's another question in the chat as well. Where can one start to contribute to their state ACC chapter? If you all have any advice on that, on maybe like a broader scale.
Sorry, do you mean the local chapter? Or sort of getting involved in the local chapter? Is that was
Yeah,
the
I
question?
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great place to start. There's multiple opportunities to get involved both in Southern California and Northern California. So reaching out to your local chapters, and then of course the national chapter as well as you go to these conferences, and just what you guys are doing right here with this FIT session. That's also, just build on what you're doing.
Thank you. Going back to the previous point and to your point, Tintin, of being uncomfortable, I feel like a lot of my co-fellows agree our path is always, putting ourselves very vulnerable and uncomfortable. And with that, I wanted to ask, how should fellows take a feedback that's uncomfortable? And if you had any thoughts on that.
I have a few thoughts, and so Dr. Venugopal is an expert in kind of feedback and medical education, so she can correct me as needed. But I think our program director has this comment he says to our fellows, which is, if you met a jerk, you just met a jerk. If you meet a jerk every day, maybe you're the jerk. And so, and I think that the point he's making is that, you know, you get a lot of different types of feedback, and the frequency of the feedback you get may be an indication about how relevant it is to you and kind of how much you should think about it. So you're likely to get one-off comments that may or may not be indicative of what you need to work on. So I would, you know, file it, contextualize it, and try to understand if it's part of a greater trend or not. Now, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. The other thing is that, you know, we're just in the middle of our CCCs here at Scripps, and you know, before we have a fellow come in, we kind of talk about the fellow and their progress, and, you know, identify things where they're doing well and maybe limitation, like, you know, opportunities for improvement. And then as part of the CCC, we review their 360-degree feedback they get from nurses, clinic staff, co-fellows, attendings, right? And we'll look at them, they'll be displayed. And I am struck by how rarely the things that there's a consensus among the group beforehand about this is what this fellow needs to work on, and how rarely that actually shows up in the written comments. So sometimes a one-off comment can actually be a really important clue about something you can improve. And so even if it just seems rare, and, you know, and even if it seems unsettling or it doesn't make sense to you, maybe that's a chance for you to become better and progress. So I wouldn't throw them out of hand. And that's where you want people you can trust, whose advice you can trust. Dr. Muse, I feel like, actually gives really good direct feedback, and that's rare. Like, you should have someone who's not afraid to give you direct feedback, and then you can trust it. Just tell me, you know, am I doing this wrong? So that'd be my comment: is don't blow it. Don't take everything as truth, but don't miss an opportunity for growth also.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's funny, we're in the midst of our CCCs as well. I totally agree with what you were just saying. Yeah, you know, I think if you come in with the mindset of this is a growth opportunity, and in terms of the feedback that you're receiving, and of course, I think again, from the administrative standpoint, having my PD hat on, we're going to give you comments that we know are going to, or we're going to condense all the evaluation, and we're going to give you the feedback that we hear that is being consistent. And to the most part, those one-offs, just so you said, might be just a one-off, right? But if we're seeing a pattern, that's something that we're going to be very direct about with you. But it's not that we're just going to give you that feedback. We're actually going to help you with that feedback, right? And we're going to help you establish a learning plan or a SMART goal or whatever it might be, so that we actually see that this is something that we can help you with. Because we're not going to just say, here's your feedback and bye. All right. Our job here is to help you along that path. And so, and we all know that there are days when people will have a bad day, and then something will show up in an evaluation. But that might not necessarily always be consistent. So again, from our administrative standpoint, we're going to be very thoughtful in our comments, and we won't give you a comment that we know. One is, we know you can work on that. We know you could do better, and we're hoping that we will be helping you along that way for long-term success. That's ultimately our goal.
Yeah, feedback is gold. You know, you get to a point where you don't get feedback, or there's not enough, and it's such a real honor and pleasure to get feedback. I love when I get it, even from patients, you know, about certain things, especially difficult feedback, right? Everyone always hears, "Oh, you're great," all this stuff. That builds you up, and that's nice to hear. But if someone cares, they're going to tell you something that's sometimes hard to hear. And there's nothing you can do to make it easier, but know that, all right, this is gold. Let me try to understand what the core of that means and what I can do to change on that, you know? There's really no beating around the bush of difficult feedback. I've had enough of it in my career, but each time I try to sit and say, all right, I might disagree with X, Y, and Z about it, but let me figure out what I can do with that to then help me improve and say what the next steps are. And I think that, your program directors and a group try to do that on a regular basis because we care, right? And because we know that, we're all seeking to improve and strive. But once you get to a point and then there's no feedback, you start to desire it. You're just like, listen, I know that there's things that I need to do to improve. If someone could help guide me in that way, then I can do that, So, yeah.
Thank you. Very well said. And I guess my other follow-up question to this is, for feedback, at least I'll just speak from a personal experience, even very hard and what may be considered negative feedbacks did not affect me as much with a mentor or an attending who has built a relationship with me and who had made me feel like, everything was for my best. And do you think mentors have this added responsibility to show, and maybe personality can make it different, hard for that, but to show that that this is truly coming from the best interest? And maybe the question could be, is it always for the best interest of the mentee?
I mean,
Um,
go ahead. Well, I was going to say, being human, I think that mentors can have bad days as well, right? And I think that, the delivery can be off sometimes, right? And the delivery can be inadvertently harsh when it doesn't have to be, right? I mean, I've had emails from people, my mentors that have just like been like, oh my goodness, where I got the message, but the way it was passed was, probably you could have rounded the edges a little bit. Everyone's always human, right? Typically with those sort of relationships, folks realize it and come back and say, listen, sorry if that came off rough or this way, that was not the intentional way, but here's where we're trying to get, I'm sorry, right? But that rarely happens, but it happens, right?
Yeah.
I'll add that I think you as you develop this mentor-mentee relationship, you want your mentor to be honest with you, right? I mean, that's the purpose of having a mentor. You want the mentor to say, I had a mentor once very early on in my career who I was, convinced that I wanted to go a certain path. And the mentor actually told me, you're not ready. And it was at that point I was like, wait, what are you talking about? I am ready to do this. And she really did say that. And she said, no, I don't think you're ready yet. She didn't say that it wasn't a path that I couldn't do at some point in time. She just pointed out to me, and she was right. I probably wasn't ready. And what I wanted to do was to actually take on some administrative role, and I didn't have the necessary background skills. Like it was more of the managerial skills, and I was learning it, and I was very early in my career, right? And I felt like I could do this. I can, this is easy enough to run this meeting, and I wasn't ready. And so it wasn't until a little later on when I got to actually improve those skills, and she helped me get on committees and things like that to help me improve some of those skill sets, where then I felt much more comfortable. But at the end of the day, again, a mentor is going to be someone who is going to be genuine with you as well and be really honest and say, this is a great path, but maybe you should think about waiting a little bit, or maybe you should, maybe it's not the path for you. So having that openness says a lot and means a lot.
Thank you.
I think we are nearing the hour, so we will probably start wrapping up. Um, if anybody has any last questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or put it in the chat. We'll wait a couple seconds. Okay. I think we are good, but thank you again, Dr. Muse, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Venugopal. It's been such a wonderful experience hearing from you about your experience and your advice in terms of mentorship, everything mentorship, looking for a mentor, how to cultivate our relationships, how to and it's been very inspiring hearing from all of you as well, who have had mentors of your own and mentees of your own as well, who's been on both sides of the mentoring relationship. I certainly learned a lot, and it enriched my experience a lot as well. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. And it's in the evening time as well, where you should be with your family. So we really appreciate you all for joining us today. Thank you, Lydia, Nare, as well. Oh, Lydia, you might be a little bit muted.
Thank you.
But yeah, but thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for joining us as well. But I think we've learned so much. Thank you all again. And I think we will say good night and goodbye.
Thanks for,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
think,
thanks
thanks for
so much
having
for
us.
having us.
Yeah, we'll see you at ACC or somewhere else.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for such a wonderful session.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you, you too.